Section 2 is called linear measurement and precision. Linear means line, measurement means you're going to measure it. So we're going to talk about measuring lines and being precise. Okay? And what it means to be precise when you measure lines. Okay? So, the vocab terms here. Again, like I said, I know it's a lot of vocab to start with. Not every section is like this. First, line segment. We actually talked about this last chapter. It has two endpoints and it can be measured. Again, the way we draw that is, that would be line segment AB. You just put a bar, a line segment on top of it instead of the line with the arrows. So, you could, yeah, some people do that, but it's, yeah, either way. It does have 2 points there, but you don't have to necessarily put them there. Okay. But line segment has two endpoints, it can be measured. If you put the endpoints, that's okay. If you don't, just make sure you don't put the arrows, because there's a difference between that and that, right? This one goes on forever. This one has a start and a stop. Okay. Precision. For some reason, this is one of the more difficult things to find in geometry. So don't be overwhelmed by it when we start talking about precision. But we're going to talk about precision. So what does it mean to be precise when you're measuring a line segment? Okay? And what precision? It depends on whatever the smallest unit is on the measuring tool. So for example, if your ruler only has inches on it, it'll depend on inches. If your ruler has half inches, it'll depend on half inches. It'll make more sense in just a minute. Okay? And we always talk about things being precise within half of a unit. Half of a centimeter, half of a meter, half of an inch, something like that. Again, we're going to spend a lot of time on precision. We're going to talk about precision some today and then a lot next class, because it's a little bit awkward to start with when we're first going over it. And then betweenness of points. This is a really fancy definition for saying that you can have a point that's between two others. Okay? So for any 2 points, A and B, there's a point we called it N, that's between A and B. That it's less than B, but greater than A. This is a really fancy point for saying you can have a line, and you can have a point here and here, and you can have another point that's between them. Okay? We all know what between is. It's sandwiched between them. Okay? It doesn't have to be directly in the middle. It might be like that. N is between B and A. Okay? And why we have this rule is because then we can add two segments up together to make a whole segment. So this is the vocab from this first section. Line segment, precision, and betweenness of points, or what it means to be between. Okay? It just happens to be sandwiched in, not necessarily in the middle, but in between these 2 points. Okay? That's all the vocab from the first section. Between is the same thing, is betweenness of points, so you don't need both of them. Congruent, okay? When we talk about congruent are things of the same measure. It basically means you could take one line segment, and if you turned it and laid it exactly on top of the other line segment, they would match up perfectly. We would call those 2 line segments congruent. Now, we'll talk about it later, but there is a difference between congruent and equal. Equals talks about numbers. 2 is equal to 2. Right? 5 is equal to 3 plus 2. You wouldn't say 5 is congruent to 3 plus 2. That doesn't make sense. Congruent talks about shapes and figures. Equals talks about numbers. So we say this line segment, XY, is congruent to. And the figure for congruent is an equal sign with a little squiggly on top. I think they call that a tilde. Is that right? Anybody know that? This sign? Isn't that called a tilde? I still don't really even know. It's an equal sign. This means congruent. Just like this means equal, this means congruent. Okay? It's an equal sign with a little squiggly on top. And when you talk about figures being congruent, how it looks on a figure is you put this little, I call it a tick mark. You put a tick mark on them to tell me those 2 lines are the same. Okay? XY is congruent to PQ. Those 2 line segments are exactly the same. If I took XY and I turned it and I laid it on top of PQ, it would match up perfectly. That's what congruent means. Same measure. Okay? Segments of the same measure. Again, congruent talks about shapes. Equal talks about numbers. We will use equal, but when we're just talking about line segments, we're talking about congruent. And then construction, that's what we talked about. It's methods of creating geometric figures without using measuring tools, without using a ruler. Okay? And that's what we did. We used a straight edge and a compass. We didn't use a ruler. Okay? And we're going to do a lot of constructions in the next couple days. Questions with that? This tick mark, if you ever see, usually they're pink in the book. If you see a pink tick mark, it means they're congruent. They're the same. If there's no pink tick mark, you can't assume that unless it tells you somewhere else. So reading a ruler. The long marks are centimeters. So in this ruler, these are whole centimeters, right? It tells me that from here. I know a lot of you know how to read a ruler, but sometimes we need to go over some of this. So this is a metric ruler, right? The shorter marks are millimeters. So with the metric system, there's 10 millimeters and 1 centimeter, right? 10 millimeters, 1 centimeter, right? Find the length of line segment LM. It's not 4 centimeters, right? I would say it's probably how many millimeters? How many millimeters would line LM be? I would say 42, right? Because it'd be 40 up to this point. These are all these little tick marks. And I would say it's about 42 millimeters. One other way you could do it, which this way would be a little tougher, you could put it in centimeters, and you could say it would be about 4 2/10 centimeters, right? 4 2 of the 10. Remember the decimal places, the first decimal place is the tens place. You could also write it like this, 4 2/10 centimeters, which would simplify to 4 1/5 centimeters. Those would all be equivalent. Okay, that makes sense. The decimal place, remember this is tenths place, 2/10. We're good there? Yeah. But I would say, I would put it in millimeters, 42 millimeters. Find the length of segment QR. Now this one's only divided in centimeters, but luckily it looks like it's how many centimeters? 5 centimeters, right? Just reading a ruler. QR is 5 centimeters long. Okay. AB. What would you say here? Now, yeah, I would say it's 18 millimeters. This one could be correct if you did what? If it was centimeters, right? It's 1 8/10 of a centimeter. I would just put it as millimeters, though. 18 millimeters. Okay. Good. That, clearly, you know, this is advanced stuff right here. How many centimeters is this? Whew. Yeah. 2 centimeters, right? Good. Excellent. Okay. Now, customary units, so this is what's typically we use in the United States, right? And for some reason, only the United States. Inches, feet, yards. Okay? Now, this is inches, the big tick marks. So, this is divided into, right. These would be half inches, right? And these would be quarter inches, because 2 quarters make a half, 2 out of 4 make a half, right? So how long is segment FG? It would be 2 3/4 inches, right? Because this is divided in fourth. 1/4, 2/4, which is also the same as a half, 3/4, 4/4, which is also the same as 1 whole, the next one. That makes sense? Okay. So this ruler is divided up into fourths, 1/4 of an inch. That's going to be important when we talk about precision. 2 3/4 inches. This would be how many inches? I would say D, right? 1 1/2 inch. Now, but how many inches is the smallest unit on the ruler? What's it divided into? Just as a separate question. Not tenths, because you can't do tenths. Inches aren't divided up into tenths. Looks like this is halves, this is fourths, this is eighths, so this is 16ths. 16ths is always 16ths. If you're unsure, just count them, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, you know, and you count it all the way to the first one. Because this would be 8/16, right? This right here would be 8/16, which is also the same as a half. This would be 4/16, which is also the same as a fourth. This would be 2/16, which is also the same as an eighth. That makes sense? So this ruler is divided into 1/16 of an inch. If we're unsure, we can always just count. If we counted all those tick marks to get to 1, it would be 16, right? So this ruler is divided up into 1/16 of an inch. That's the smallest unit on this ruler. This would be what? IX? Basically, I'm asking you, is it divided up into quarters or halves? It's divided up into quarters, right? 2 and 1/4 would be how long it is. Okay, so precision. We're just going to introduce this today, and we're going to talk about it next time, okay? It says find the precision for 32 3/4 inches. I want to know how precise is this measurement. And when we talk about precision, we give it a range. And the range is always to a half of a unit above and a half of a unit below the measurement. We always give it a range. So in this case, if you were looking at this ruler, you don't have it, this ruler is divided up into fourths, right? Because I know that because it gives me in 3/4. Okay? So the measuring tool is divided up into fourths. So we always take the smallest unit of the measurement and we take half of it. Because we want the range, the unit, to be half of a unit. Okay? So we take 1/4, because that's the smallest unit, times a half, which is 1/8. Okay? So the precision is 1/8. And the way you find the precision is you always take the smallest unit it's divided into and take a half of it. So the measurement itself is going to be precise between 32 5/8 and 32 7/8. Now, how did I get those? I took this 1/8 of an inch. Again, we're going to do a lot of precision, so don't panic yet on me. I took this unit, and I took 32 1/4, and I added 1/8 of an inch, and I took 32 1/4, and I subtracted 1/8 of an inch. And that's how I came up with these two numbers. This is the range that we say it's precise within. Okay? It's precise within this range, which is half of a unit of a fourth. Okay? We find the precision, we add it to the original measurement, and we subtract it to the original measurement, and that's the range that it's precise within. Let's look at one or two more. We'll come back to it. Find the precision for 15 millimeters, explain its meaning. So if this line segment was divided up into millimeters, that's the smallest unit, right? The smallest unit that this is divided into is 1 millimeter. Okay? That's the smallest. We're not talking half millimeters. We're not talking quarter millimeters. You wouldn't talk about quarter millimeters. You would talk about nanometers and that sort of thing. But the smallest unit's 1 millimeter. So we always take whatever the smallest measuring unit is, in this case 1 millimeter, and we always multiply by half. So the precision is half of a millimeter because we took 1 millimeter times a half. It's always times a half. The explain its meaning part is give me the range it's precise within. And to do that, we take 15 minus 0.5 of a millimeter and 15 plus 0.5 of a millimeter. So that'd be 14.5 millimeters to 15.5 millimeters. So this measurement is precise within this range. Okay? Half of the smallest unit. Kind of making sense? Let's look at one more. 88 millimeters. What's the smallest unit on this measuring tool? Just 1 millimeter, right? It's measured in 1 millimeters. You always take that smallest unit, you always multiply by half. 1 times a half is a half of a millimeter. That's the precision. This number, half of a millimeter, is the precision. It doesn't say to explain what the precision is, but if it did, I would say this measurement is precise from 87.5 millimeters to 88.5 millimeters. To 1/2 below this and 1/2 above it. I could have wrote 0.5 here. Instead I wrote the fraction. It doesn't matter either way. Okay. Find the precision for this one. So this will be the last one we do talk about today. So, what's the smallest unit that this measuring tool is divided into? Eighths, right? It's divided into eighths. 1/8, right? So it's divided into eighths. And to find the precision, you always take the smallest unit and you always multiply by 1/2. Remember multiplying fractions, you just multiply straight across, multiply numerator and denominator. That's 1/16. So the precision for this measurement is 1/16 of a millimeter. So if I wanted to find the range that it's precise within, it didn't ask me that. It just told me to find the precision. That's the precision. That's how precise it is. If I wanted to find the range that it's precise within, I would take 7 5/8 plus 1/16. That would be the maximum. And 7 5/8 minus 1/16. And that would be the minimum. You would just say it's precise from this to this. So no, it doesn't matter which one comes first. Good question. So remember when you add these together, you need common denominators. This would be like 10/16, right? If you multiply both by 2. So you would get 7 11/16. Here, this would be also like 10/16. So you would get 7 9/16. So it's precise from that to that. That's the range of the precision. The precision itself is 1/16 of a millimeter. You always take the precision and you add it, that's the maximum, subtract it, that's the minimum. Okay?